I would like to welcome everyone to this next session of our OER, or in our open, what do we even call it? Open Education Week. And our next presenter is John Johnson. He'll be talking about the SALT tour, and he'll explain more about that. John is a continuing lecturer and teaching fellow in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science in the Faculty of Science. In his research, John aims to identify natural patterns and trends involving sediment, lake water levels, and climate to predict future scenarios for some of the largest freshwater resources on Earth. In his teaching, he is constantly pushing the boundaries of technology to bring the classroom a logical world to his students. He loves teaching and has taught about almost 20 years at multiple universities. Currently, he's teaching fourth year classes at Waterloo that include online, in-person, blended lab and field components. So basically, John's everywhere. And with that, thank you, John. And I'm looking forward to hearing your talk and having questions afterwards.
Take it away. Today, I'm going to talk about an open educational resource called the SALT Tour. And we've shown that it improves understanding of what it means to think like a geoscientist. So considering space, time, field, and systems thinking. So my co-authors are Henry, and he was an undergraduate student hired as a co-op, and it developed into an undergraduate thesis. So that was the core of his work to produce this. And a fellow instructor that helped co-supervise Henry, Jen Parks, also in the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. So every good idea is able to expand because of an opportunity. And so thank you to Dr. Bob Lemieux in the Dean's Undergraduate Teaching Initiative, offering up $500,000 to all these projects in science. And so we competed for several different projects, and one project directly linked to the SALT Tour, which I'm presenting today, has to do with a proposal of emerging technologies, enhancing the field, experiential, and active-based learning in Earth environmental sciences. And this project too, this part that I'll present today, was leveraging the use of some technology, a Google Expedition kit, to engage and motivate students for immersive learning experiences. Where the students couldn't get there, it was impossible or not feasible or invisible. So after thinking about this pathway of this SALT tour that we created, it started all the way back in 2019. And after reflecting, there was a lot that went on. This slide is really busy, but it summarizes very effectively that this began in 2019 and is continuing into today, into 2023 and beyond. And it constantly evolves, as much open resources do. So in 2019, we received funding and we bought some technology to actually experiment in the classroom with virtual reality. So teacher-guided tours and student-guided tours. So then we hired Henry in this funding to actually develop tours and figure out best practices. And that was the beginnings of the SALT tour to apply in class, an introductory earth science class. Now this happened to be when the pandemic hit. So Henry was able to experiment in person with the technology. And then when the pandemic hit, we pivoted very well, thanks to Henry, online to actually offer these tours. So it went from teacher guided to actually student or learner guided. And so there's different ways to create these tours. So we're very acute to how do we create that to be most effective. And then this developed into Henry's undergraduate thesis. And then there was another challenge beside the pandemic, Holly, the platform that hosted the SALT tour that we put online to be available to all students and anybody else in the world, it retired. So Google put that away and there wasn't an immediate replacement. So we went to ArcGIS Story Map and put it on that platform. We're going to show that it doesn't matter what platform that open educational, we can find the right one and modify it slightly, but it's that framework that we've built and what we've learned is most effective for learning, and for this case, about salt. So quite the journey that has a challenge of a pandemic pivoting and a retirement of a platform, but we pivoted to a new platform. And with this undergraduate thesis work, we demonstrated that it's effective at learning. We've done this in 6 offerings of the course over 3 different years, so hundreds of students, actually several thousand, and let's kind of dive into it. With the money, we created and did simple virtual reality with these viewers, a phone within, a router, so that students could actually look at the same thing. As a teacher, I could annotate this, they could see it immediately, and I could see where the students were looking. So I chose this system because it's cost-effective, self-contained, is already tested, and is versatile for teaching moments on the fly. So we bought this expedition kit and we used existing tours to try to engage and motivate students at a simple level. And then we had to figure out best practices, and that's where Henry came in. A lot of his work was to research what are the best practices. How do we create a self-guided one and not just depend upon other people's? How do we implement this in class? And how do we seek feedback? So we put this by professionals and several graduate and undergraduate students. So in the end, we created this photosphere tour guide that kind of gives templates and tips that we found in this process. And Henry also created some YouTube videos to show the benefits as well, so you can view those. But to the right here shows the typical experience. Although this photosphere, this picture, should wrap right around you. So you can look up, you can look down, you can look all to the side, and it feels like you're underground in a salt mine. So you can better understand several components. And within these, we strategically overlaid images, text, points of interest, and descriptions to try to anchor understanding in modern salt, ancient salt, how does salt form? And salt is a really important and fascinating resource. So what we did was many components to lead up to this tour guide and benefits. So we thought about a lot of stuff. So what did we think about? This slide is a little bit overwhelming, so I kind of broke it up into 1A, B, 2A, 2B, 3A, and 4A. So first, we had to think about photospheres. There's some already existing photospheres, like on Google Street View, that we could utilize for these. But wait a sec. What if we wanted to capture new images and take them with a camera or our phone with an app? And we did. So we combined those for different uses. And then what about existing tours? Can't we just use existing tours? Well, we found out we needed to create new ones. They didn't really align with the learning outcomes in the course, and so we wanted that better alignment for student learning. And we, as mentioned before, purchased an existing kit that's already tested and utilized to create self-guided and teacher-guided tours. So we had to think about, okay, where do we get the photospheres from and what's in them to be most effective? Creating the tours with the photospheres and the text and the images, and also what's the technology to help them see it either self-guided or teacher-guided. So there's a lot of thought within these, and they're in the documents that I provide so you can see some of the tips. So when you look at this, what do you think? It's salt. It's beautiful. We use it for our food. Tastes good. We also use it for safety in the wintertime, putting it on roads. But there's so many facets to this that we thought we'd create a salt tour that facilitates engagement and student learning that intentionally aligns with a foundational course learning objective. That learning objective is basically adopting the perspective of a geoscientist or thinking like a geoscientist, spatially, in time, in the field, in nature, virtually or in person, and systems thinking. So if we dive into those 4 ways of thinking, just to wrap your mind about what could be in this SALT tour, if you're talking about spatial thinking, where is salt located? Is it found on the Earth's surface or is it in the subsurface, hidden underground? What scale what about minerals, tiny little minerals, or massive layers in a sedimentary basin, or dimensions going from 2D or 3D? So these are some of the things that we grapple with to leap students ahead of thinking like a geoscientist spatially. Temporally or time, modern day, can we see salt today? How about in the ancient, back millions of years deep underground? You just saw a photosphere a few slides ago of that. How about systems thinking? How does it form? Well, actually, students realize that it's linked to all Earth's four spheres: the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the geosphere, and the biosphere. All contribute to its formation. And they were astonished at the rates of formation, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. And to improve field thinking, can we improve student observations and know what to record or measure if we were to put them into the field? So to prepare them before they go into the physical world. And that will certainly impact their interpretation, whether natural or human induced. So this is the SALT tour, and the link right here, I will give it afterwards, will be available to anybody in the world that is currently in ArcGIS story maps, but we'll plan to put on many platforms so it's available to all. But in this class, Introductory Earth Sciences, we have this natural resources module that introduces all natural resources and just mentions salt a little bit. And then the students go into the SALT tour because there's a quiz associated with it, and they learn about salt using this tour. So we intentionally created this SALT tour with scenes, so the 360-degree photospheres with points of interest, and we had an associated quiz to see if they picked up on some knowledge and their perception of their learning. And that's the basis for Henry's undergraduate BSc thesis. So to actually see if it was effective or not, and looking at the quiz questions, we had two different types of questions. Quantitative questions, so they're knowledge-based matching ranking questions that we asked the students. But also in the quizzes, we had qualitative, so getting in the mind of a student in perception-based written questions. So to show you some of the results, to show you the effectiveness, that Henry looked at the results and he looked at the quantitative knowledge-based question, such as, after viewing the SALT tour, please match the geologic term with the definition. And we found that the majority of the prompts were answered correctly, shown by the green right here in several different topics. They seem to indicate that the SALT tour facilitated student learning and improved their geoscience thinking, and in some instances, improved the four ways of thinking. So beyond quantitative quiz questions, we also had qualitative questions, such as, after having viewed the SALT tour, do you feel you've gained a better understanding of what it means to think like a geoscientist? And if yes, in which way? And we found that the majority, or 91% of students, actually agreed it improved their geoscience thinking. A small percentage said no, and some were unclear with their communication in the answer to this question. This shows the majority of students came away with an improved understanding of geoscience thinking as a whole. But if we dive a little deeper into the four ways of thinking, they do indicate, the students indicate, that 21% say it improved their spatial thinking, 24% said it improved their temporal thinking, 23% improved the systems thinking, and 23% improved the field thinking. So we've got it broken down even further to do a deep dive into exactly what they improved, but we grouped these to actually demonstrate that all four ways of thinking somewhat equally within our SALT tour were effective, which is quite astonishing. But in the design, we intended that, but to see that come out was very exciting. Another qualitative question that we asked is, did you experience an aha moment, or a moment of sudden realization, inspiration, insight, recognition, or comprehension? And if so, describe it. So here's another pie graph showing that 3/4 of the students with the close wedges of pie here showed that they did have an aha moment. And there's several of them listed here linked to the 4 ways of thinking and geoscience thinking as a whole. Some were unclear in their communication. We couldn't interpret or tell what they actually meant, and some said no. But when you look at these high percentages right here and dive deep into their answers, the students were astonished on how salt formed, using all the different spheres and the rate of formation, modern day, and how that links to the ancient. Students also had aha moments with the depth and scale of minds to actually get them in a mind to look around virtually and to understand the process of million-year-old salt deposits that we actually mine and use today and transport all over the globe. So in summary, we've got the link for the salt tour right now that is on ArcGIS story maps. And it is also on the new Expedition Pro, and we hope to put it on many different platforms to not only get that VR experience, but understand salt and the geoscience thinking. Here's several conferences and areas we have presented this, and kind of gives you templates on the creation of such VR tours and tips and tricks that we have learned through this journey of many years since 2019. Here's the abstract included in the Open Education Week. And thank you very much for listening. That's the SALT Tour, improving understanding of what it means to think like a geoscientist, considering space, time, field, and systems thinking.